We talked in a previous lecture a little bit about the idea that patterns of sport and recreation frequently acted as vectors of other aspects of culture over and above just the sport or the play itself. We talked a little bit about sport, for example, as a vector for gambling and wagering. Another way in which certain kinds of sport and recreation served as vectors for other aspects of culture is sport and recreation serving as a means of projecting status or prowess, projecting power, projecting the financial ability to afford whatever expensive recreation it is you were participating in some cases even being able to project the power of mastery over life and death, which some historians have interpreted as one of the reasons for the popularity of certain kinds of hunting, cockfighting, bear baiting. An example of this in the colonial period is that one form of fairly regularized sport activity that does begin developing in the late 1600s and early 1700s in the Chesapeake region was the gradual emergence of thoroughbred horse racing as a recreation. And thoroughbred horse racing is a good example of a sport or recreational behavior, one of the basic purposes of which was to project prowess. If you think of thoroughbred racing functioning for the owners of thoroughbred horses as a means by which they demonstrate both their wealth and power and also their benevolence as a force in their communities because of their willingness to invest their resources in providing this kind of recreational activity for others. So this is an image of William Byrd II, who was one of the most successful planters in Virginia in the late 1600s. The Byrd family would eventually become one of the oldest, wealthiest, most long-standing, influential families in Virginia. But William Byrd II was something of a newcomer. You might think of him as new money. And William Byrd was one of the people responsible for establishing thoroughbred horse racing in Virginia in the late 1600s. It's interesting to compare this image of William Byrd and what he's trying to project about himself to the one we saw in a previous lecture of John Winthrop. John Winthrop, the Puritan, while still showing you his ability to afford relatively expensive ruffles, was nevertheless purposely projecting a plain, austere kind of an aesthetic. William Byrd is projecting wealth and prowess more directly. Blue is a fairly expensive color in the late 1600s. This is a little bit flashier and showier, a kind of personal projection. And then, as always, in a painting of this vintage, you want to look for messages other than just what does someone's nose look like. And he has gone out of his way to paint a window for you out of which you can see one of the sources of his wealth, namely that he participates in that mercantile trade that we discussed in a previous lecture. And William Byrd is an example of thoroughbred horse racing as status and prowess projection. And thoroughbred horse racing for spectators serves as a gambling vector, serves as a spectator recreation, and for the providers of thoroughbred horse racing, it serves to demonstrate the ability to afford the provision of thoroughbred horse racing and the willingness to be seen as a benevolent force in the community. One of the documents that you will read in this module is a newspaper announcement from Virginia in the early 1700s announcing a festival at which wealthy area residents will provide for the fairgoers thoroughbred horse racing and a variety of other recreational activities all at the same fair some of them wrestling, some of them obviously sport and recreation to us, but also things that look a little bit like beauty contests, music contests. And for spectators of that fair, for people who come to the fair, it is an example of the gradual development of more regular forms of recreational activity in the colonies, and the gradual emergence of something of a line between a world of work and a world of play and recreation. But for William Byrd, for the people who own the horses and race the horses and place quite large side bets on the outcome of the horse racing, thoroughbred horse racing was as much a projection of prowess in the community and of elite economic and social status in the community as it was strictly something you just did because it was fun to do.